Қайырлы күн, құрметті әріптестер. Добрый день, уважаемые участники. Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining today's session. My name is Laura Polovanova. I am the coordinator of the National Erasmus Plus Office in Kazakhstan. My colleague Nazirke Mediasheva is also here and she'll be providing technical assistance as usual. Let me remind you of today's session. So today we'll be talking about capacity building in higher education projects. If you remember, as of now, we held a number of sessions, introductory sessions about each component of the Erasmus Plus program. And from now on, we'll be holding webinars on how to write competitive project proposals for each component of the program. And today we'll be talking about project proposals, namely for the capacity building in higher education project, CBHE. So the session will last for about 2 hours or 2.5, and I'm delighted to introduce you our today's trainer and speaker, Carlos Machado. Carlos is our today's trainer, and he is an independent educational advisor and expert, and I know that he's very much experienced in specifically CBHE projects. So he kindly agreed to hold this session for us today. So let me now give the floor to Carlos. Carlos, thanks for your willingness to hold this session for us, first of all. And maybe you could tell us about yourself some more, and maybe you can also explain how today's session is structured. Thank you.
Thank you, Laura. Добрый день to everybody. I have more than 20 years of experience in this type of projects, starting with Tempus. In fact, a project with Kazakhstan was my first experience in capacity building, and that was already in the last century, has to say, in 1999. So nearly 25 years of experience. So I'm also very familiar with the landscape of higher education in Kazakhstan, where I've been participating in large number of initiatives, and I was also coordinating projects with Kazakhstan in the past. So I also had different stages in participation. I started as an assistant, and then I became a coordinator. Then I created my company. I moved to Switzerland, and since then, for already like 10 years, I'm consultant, individual expert also for some initiatives for the European Commission, and I'm also expert in evaluation processes, and I'm member of accreditation committees in organizations like AQUIN in Germany. So I have a wide, broad experience in not only in project proposals, but also in evaluating such proposals and in the whole educational system and volume implementation.
Thank you, Carlos, for the introductory speech. I think we are now ready to start with your part, with your presentation. We have almost 35 participants right now, so feel free to start your presentation. Do you want us to share your presentation, or you can share your screen now?
I will share my screen if I'm allowed.
Yeah, we can see your presentation now.
All right. So I want to structure the session today is like 50% with some sharing my experience and practice with the audience. And also I would like to conduct 2 exercises. So also combining theory and practice, not me talking all the time, but I think giving some opportunity to participants to discuss in groups and to present results is also a good way of making more interactive the session. And also, as you will see, there are like 2 parts in the preparation of such proposals. But what I will not do here, as I explained to Laura before the start of the session, I will not go too much in details regarding the guidelines and the main directions addressed by the European Commission, because there you have the program guideline that explains what are the requirements, what are the objectives. So I don't think it's necessary to go into details about that, but I think it's more important for you to understand a bit of the principles about writing such proposal, and also about the mechanisms, because from 2021 with the new program, there were some changes. So I think people that were maybe more aware of previous Tempus experiences and the previous Erasmus Plus program, the program from 2013 to 2020, they will observe that there have been some changes, especially in the last program. So these are the main learning objectives of the session. But I think also to give you a bit of perspective, how to prepare the new project proposals, or the ones that will be open probably in October, November this year, and to be submitted in February 2024. These are the main objectives of the call. So basically, as this hasn't changed much, but also compared to previous programs, the objectives more or less are the same, with one particularity. Now there are 3 strands. Before there were joint projects, structural projects. Now you have 3 strands, and that's how they divide the proposals. In each strand, they have particular objectives, which can be found in the program guideline, also with different duration and different amount of funding. So for example, the strand 1 is about fostering access to cooperation in higher education. So this is mainly for newcomers or universities with less experience in the program. Now it's more challenging to find newcomers, because more and more universities are participating in this type of initiatives. From Kazakhstan, I think there is a large number of institutions that they have already participated in the program. So that they are giving a particular strand, a particular action with a specific budget as well, to give opportunity to these universities. And here, for example, the budgets are smaller. They're usually between 200 and 400,000 euros, and the duration is 24 to 36 months. So for example, one of the typical activities that are founded between this strand 1 is, for example, to improve the internationalization processes of such institutions. And for that, for example, activities that are supported by the Erasmus Plus program can be the creation of international relation structures, or the training of staff for internationalization, to develop internationalization strategies or internationalization processes. Compared to that, you have the main bulk of projects that are selected and approved within the capacity building for higher education, and is the strand 2, that is called Partnerships for Transformation. So this is more or less the continuation of previous projects that they were defined as joint projects. And here also one of the priorities, for example, is to try to involve other actors, not only higher education institutions, but also private sector, associations of companies, chambers of commerce, also NGOs, so all other type of stakeholders to promote especially innovation It can be not only in the technical concept of innovation that we could understand, but also in innovation, for example, in educational processes. So even creating closer links between university and enterprises and industry sometimes requires creation of new structures like research and development or technological transfer that many they don't have. I'm not talking in Kazakhstan, I'm talking in general. And also promoting reforms in higher education. So Kazakhstan is member of the Council of Europe and is Bologna signatory, but there are many other countries that they are not. So one of the priority in all this program also is to bring the European educational landscape, we call it European higher education area, closer to other countries, also in terms of recognition of studies, comparability with the credit transfer system, etc. And in here also the duration is between 24 and 36 months, and the budget is higher, it's between 400 and 800,000 euros. And then the last strand is called strand 3, and is for a structural reform project. So here the particularity is that it can be longer, it can be between 3 and 4 years, but one of the conditions is that the ministries of education need to be present, and in some cases, other ministries, they need to be present as well. So sometimes universities here have a smaller role, and is more fundamental changes in the country. Like, for example, I'm now external evaluator of a project on dual system. So here is also to create the conditions at ministry level, at international quality accreditation level, to have like the methodology and frameworks to assess and evaluate dual system and professional diplomas in Kazakhstan. And here, as I mentioned, not only it's longer, but the projects, the strand 3 have the highest budget, because projects can be up to 1 million euros. But this is all that I will talk about the conditions for the call for proposals. All the information is in the program guideline available online in the website of the executive agency and the Erasmus Plus program. Now, according to the executive agency, when you ask and you are wondering yourself, what is a successful application? So there is also a shift in what is a successful application for them. For them, it's not any longer what success in terms of being selected. Now what they want to see is results. And this is a difference compared to the previous program. In the previous program, they were paying a lot of attention to the input, and also in that sense, they were looking at how the money has been spent. Now they are not looking so much how money is distributed, how money will be spent, but they are more cautious that projects deliver the results that are presented in the proposals. Because what is the reason of this change? I think also after the assessment on the impact of the projects and impact analysis done by external auditors and experts, many of the projects, they are not very successful in terms of sustainability. So in Tempus and previous Erasmus Plus program, they see that the continuation after 5 years of the project outcomes are not as they expected. So now even in the way that the projects are evaluated for selection, they want like to see that the results are tangible, the results are long-term sustainable within institutions, and also in the way that projects are implemented. Sometimes projects are too vague from the beginning, and if they are vague from the beginning, the results will be also vague. So they need concrete coherence between the implementation phase and the after project phase. So that is not so much now important how much money will be distributed between work packages, because now it will be all based in a lump sum. I will explain a bit later what is that. But there is less accountability and less bureaucracy in terms of providing documents, and there will be more emphasis in how the results are achieved, and that you can prove that, for example, if we are talking about curriculum development, it's clear that you should have indication of all indicators that are validating those results, but also the accreditation plans, the documentation within the involved school or faculty, that the teachers are allocated, that the universities have the resources necessary to maintain those results, etc. So the projects, when we talk about preparing project proposals and how to prepare a competitive project proposal, we need to understand that already a competitive project proposal starts even before starting writing it. So normally there are different ways that you start the preparation of such proposal, and sometimes it comes from some kind of idea from one individual. Can be the dean of a faculty, can be the head of international relations, can be the dean, or even the rectors. But when we start with an idea, the first thing we need to think about is what are the benefits of getting involved in such an idea, apart from the money and the prestige that means to be involved in an Erasmus Plus, but is how that idea will benefit my faculty, or how that idea will benefit my institution. So it has to be, for me, it's very important that that idea is linked to some kind of strategy or priority of the institution to have more support, especially when it comes from a teacher, from a professor, or from some department. And then also, apart from the priorities that are given by the guidelines, but how we will benefit from that, and how my institution will benefit from that, has to be linked, I think, to the strategy and to the priorities set by the institutions. So many years ago, because Kazakhstan adhered to the Bologna process, so many of the projects were linked to this, how we generate experts in applying the Bologna system to our institution. And then there were a lot of projects related to quality assurance, to ECTS transfer, to internationalization processes, recognition of studies, because that was the priority for Kazakhstan. Now, you want to develop a business, a project idea. You also need to be aware what are the challenges for your institution. And here, for example, sometimes, in my experience, sometimes the main burden is administrative, is the bureaucracy inside. Also, for example, you need to be aware, if we want to internationalize the institution, and you want to cooperate with Europe, is how many people speak English, for example, if the main communication channel is English. There were projects even in French or German with Kazakhstan in the past. But do we have the enough resources, human resources in my institution? We have competent people that they know how to administer the projects at financial level and at administrative level. So if sometimes also I observe that especially when Kazakh universities are the coordinators, is that the people in the administration, they are not experienced in international projects, so they don't know how to transfer money. They have their own national rules, and they don't know how to apply national rules to international context. I was involved in some projects with Southeast Asia, for example, or with India. And in India now they have a big problem because there is a new national law by the Indian government because of terrorism. They said because of terrorism, but Indian universities are not allowed to transfer money to European partners. And that's a big challenging problem. Even imagine it comes a bit Kafkian, because it could be that after the end of the project, they need to send money back to European Commission, and they cannot because of the national regulation. So there are diplomatic efforts, dialogue between the European Union and India to see how to solve the problem. But for the time being, the Indian partners are handcuffed. They cannot, they have to look for other type of solutions, paying in terms of invoices, etc. So the legal and financial differences between Europe and the third countries, that can be very challenging, and this needs to be thought about before. I think for Kazakhstan, at the beginning, maybe was a few years ago, was a bit challenging, but now there is a procedure and there is a bulk of people with expertise how to deal with these issues. But for example, now what is challenging for Kazakh partners that want to be coordinators is the change rate, because you receive the money in euros and you need to distribute the money in euros to partners, but it might be that your bank obliges you to change everything in tengris, and then from the moment you receive the money to the money you send the money, from the moment you receive the money to the moment that you send the money to the partners, there might be a big change in currency fluctuation, and that will impact the budget of the project. Not for the commission, because they don't care, but internally, it might mean that your university or institution needs to put additional resources. So these are challenges that may happen during the preparation phase, and that you need to think about. Also, a common flaw when you are trying to prepare even if it's a good idea and a good proposal, is that, as I mentioned, if it's not aligned strategically to the interests of the institution, it might be that you don't have institutional support. And I think it's easier to prepare a project proposal when you have support from the rector, vice rectors, head of departments, in case if it's a teacher. So I think that is one of the first challenges that, and when you are preparing the first phase, is something that you need to discuss internally. Don't do things individually. Try to create like a working group within university with different people, also with support of International Relations Office, some people from administration, the authorities. So create a working group so that everybody is on the same page. They are aware that you want to prepare the proposal and that you have the institutional support. Because also sometimes it's just one teacher, one individual who wants to prepare everything, even creating the consortium, but at the end, nobody knows in the university that proposal went through. It's like a silo, it's like an island within university, and that will carry out different problems in the long term. So it's better to have not one individual, but one group that develops a proposal internally, even before contacting potential partners. I think that is very important. And as you see, from the moment you have the idea to the moment that you even present the project, there are a lot of phases. I will go to some of them, but it is much complex than simply developing an idea, to write it down, to create consortium, to follow the procedures, and then submit and be successful. Also, you need like strategic thinking, not only about the institutional benefits, but then there are also more complex issues when you are bringing partners on board, because they also need to have the similar priorities and needs. Also, this happens when you are working in projects that are multi-country, not only within national projects, for example, with Kazakhstan. But one of the things that the evaluators and the commissioner is checking when you bring different partners is that they have more or less similar needs. It's easier to justify a proposal. Sometimes you see, I saw in the past projects with different countries, but you see that they are different at different level of development. So if you are at different level of development, you are going to have necessarily different needs. And if you use like a one size fits all, it's not going to work, because the needs, let's say, for example, in Israel are different to the needs in Mauritania or the needs in Tajikistan. Even sometimes there's not even like a cultural proximity. So with Kazakhstan, it's very common to see projects that are with former Soviet republics, because they have like common background, and also very often they have the similar needs. But now even the level of development in some areas like technological transfer or innovation in Kazakhstan is much more developed than in Tajikistan or Kyrgyzstan, no? So even if you want to bring a project at the regional level, or with Armenia or Georgia, so you might see certain differences. And this need to be adequately addressed in the proposal. Before, I think they gave importance to the way that the projects were written. You can have an approved reader for the proposal, but if it's not perfect English, that's not so relevant right now. They look more to the content and the ideas and the coherence of the proposal, rather than if it's an English speaker or a native speaker who is writing the proposal. I think that they give more importance to the content than to the format. So even if the English written in the proposal is not perfect, that should not be an obstacle for getting selected. Also, for the management team and the department team, this can be also a good opportunity in terms of improving professional skills, in terms of communication, to have international exposure, and also in terms of writing. I think if the people involved have certain kind of management skills, that help for the planning, the vision. Also, what happens very often is that they are academics trying to prepare project proposals. And sometimes you cannot prepare a project proposal with an academic mind, in the sense that you are not going to write a dissertation, or you're not going to write a research thesis. Writing project proposals is specific. So if you think too academically, also is going to be a disaster, in my opinion, because you are not going to think about capacity output. You are going to think about academic scientific output. And that's not what the Commission wants to say. They don't want to say, for them, it's not so important how many publications are you going to write as a result of the project. Even the projects are not results oriented. They can finance or help with research, increase research capacity, but it's not like Horizon projects or research, basic research projects. So they have a different dynamic, although some of the components might be similar, but the outputs are totally different in a research-based project than in a capacity building project. Here is about training people. Here is about creating new structures. Here is about reform, educational reform, governance reform. It's not so much about research output. So that's not what they would expect as main indicator in one of the capacity building proposals. Also, I think if the individual or the working group has no very much international exposure, it's important to bring the responsible for international relations on board, also for the communication and for the for contacting external partners. So what we need to look upon in order to set up a project. So the first thing would be resources, that we have resources in terms of staff, infrastructure, and time, because for writing such proposals, normally 2-3 months are necessary, at least 2 months. Then to look at all the documentation, the official documentation, the calls for proposals, the guide for applicants, the terms of reference, and the institutional support. Here, for example, one common mistake is, and I saw that very much the last year, especially when you change from one program to another program, there are some rules that are different and people are not aware. You still think that they more or less is like the previous program. But for example, in 2021, there was very big amount of projects that were considered ineligible. I think it was around 30%. Why they were ineligible? Because in the Erasmus Plus program 2013-2020, you could include countries with non-higher education institutions. It could be private companies, it could be NGOs from one country, European country. That changed in the new program 2020-2027. Now you must include at least one academic partner per country involved in the project. And many were not aware of the change. And because of that, there was a large number of projects that were ineligible. So don't think that the program guide of 2020 is the same as the program guide in 2023. Just look for the call for proposals for your specific project. And I think that will help to have bad experiences afterwards. Yeah, this is what I said before. So remember that you might have a very original idea, but if it doesn't fall into the strategy of the institution, you may not have the necessary support, and this will have some negative consequences, may have negative consequences in the long term. And I saw also cases like this in different projects with Kazakhstan, that basically it was just one man representing the whole institution, and that is not good. Even you had a meeting in the university and you don't see any of the authorities. I think that that is not a good practice. So these are just practical tips. So before approaching other institutions, arrange open meetings with an institution, disseminate information, and trying to inform your vice chancellor or your rector and the academic register. Then also, sometimes because departments and faculties work in silos, and you have now, for example, you can apply to many projects, but only 2 projects can be selected per institution. So it might happen that your university, you want to apply for a project, you develop a project proposal, but you have 5 more from your same university, and you are not aware of. So the European Commission will only take 2 in function of the scores, the priorities. There are different factors, but be aware that your university can get maximum 2 projects. Before there were 3. Now they reduce it to just 2 projects. So even you might be competing with your colleagues from different departments. It's also, as I mentioned, good to have like a review of the project proposals. So it can be the academic heads, the vice rector. At the internal level, it's important that you have somebody else also overviewing the project proposal, and maybe they can give you tips, they can help you with different things. So don't keep the projects for yourself. Try to share as much as possible internally before even going outside. Yeah, well, these are generic. I will not go into that. But these are the different components that the individual person that wants to prepare the proposal needs to think about. So it's about defining aims, objectives based on identified needs and problems. And for that is the first stage, that is the analytical stage. You need to think what you want to help with your proposal at institutional level and at national level. What will be the context and target group that will be impacted by your proposal? Where it will take place and when? So also when you present the proposal, if you know that the project will start in January, normally in January of given year, if, for example, if it's in terms of, it's a project that is focusing on curriculum development, you also know that you have an academic year, and you know when the academic year starts and when it ends. So you need to start planning in function of that. So you cannot put activities that make no sense. For example, like piloting the courses in the middle of the academic year. You know that some of the courses, they need to follow the start and end of the academic year. So in function of that, you need to do your work plan. Then also in terms of practicalities, like for example, what I mentioned about financial transfers, recruitment, as I mentioned, the start and end of the academic year. In terms of funding. Now, for example, you need to take into consideration that 10% is co-financed. Before it was not the case, but now 10% is co-financed. And you have to demonstrate, so you will only get 90% of the grant. So do you have the institutional support to cover that 10%? Because imagine your department has not the funds necessary. So who is going to cover that? So that is something that you need to take into account. Then in terms of partner finding and team building, you might need, if your English is not good or you don't have enough academic connections, you might need other colleagues that they can help you to build up the partnership. You cannot do it alone. And also in terms of English skills, maybe to communicate with our universities, you will need some assistant. Can be secretary or can be the head of international relations, but you need some person for that. The means of action means exactly the resources that you have available in terms of infrastructure, in terms of equipment. Sometimes for example, in many projects, one of the goals is to create lab equipment, but maybe you already have lab equipments from other projects. So if you have lab equipments from other projects, you might need to look for something else. They're not going to give you twice the money for the same thing. So this is something very important. I think also in the planning phase, the communication between partners is extremely important. Sometimes one of the weaknesses I see in many proposals is that there is uncertainty because there's no communication. So you asked before, you needed the grant agreement or like partnership agreement and letters of intent that needed to be signed. But after that, you provide that. You don't know what is going on the project, and sometimes you don't even know if the project was submitted or not because they don't communicate. A good practice is after the project is submitted is that you send the project to everybody, to all the partners, and that you mention that the project was successfully submitted and you send the reference. But I know cases that nobody knows anything about the project, even after the submission phase. And that's not good. And then also another project element that you need to be aware of and constant communication with the partners is the follow-up of the project. So very often they will ask you what is the situation with the evaluation. So you need to know exactly what are the phases in the evaluation of your project. When there is a short list, when the project announcement or the selection of projects is expected, so people are aware, okay, until August or September, we will not know anything, so we don't know, we don't need to worry about. Then when the selection is announced, many coordinators, if they are not selected, they don't say anything. They only say if projects are selected. But it's good practice to say, okay, thank you very much for your cooperation. We were not selected. But there are many coordinators that don't do that. And I don't think that is nice because you maintain this uncertainty in partners, and that doesn't help. Maybe you will need partners for future projects if project was unsuccessful, and that doesn't generate trust between partners. It's very important to communicate all the phases of the project proposal after being submitted, not only during the submission. Now, what the Commission is looking is not only the intercultural dimension between partners and institutions, that they want like mixed partnerships. So it's for the Strand 2 especially, they want different type of stakeholders. Private sector, public sector, NGOs, sometimes ministries, even if they are as associated partners. They want to see that the work can be done with the financial and personal resources, so they look very much at the capacity of the institution. So when they see proposals of the same department or same university, and they know through internal audits or even through the national Erasmus offices that this university is too much involved in projects, they know they don't have capacity for more. So they will take that into consideration into the selection process. And that's also something that you need to think about. If you don't have the available financial and personal resources, maybe it's better that some of your colleagues or some other departments prepare the proposal and not appear you. If in one university it's always the same person appearing, I don't think that's good. They like to see diversity. Diversity and inclusion. They are two keywords in the European Commission right now. Then also, one of the first things that you do is a work plan and a timetable. So you can also prepare like that's also very nice from partners when you are preparing the project proposal. Just prepare a small action plan for the submission. So you know that if you start 2 months before, you have 2 months to prepare the project, and you can create deadlines for the different items that you need to prepare, like the like this relevance part, the need analysis, the logical framework, the word package description, the Excel file with the budget cost. So for different elements in the proposal, you can create also internal work plan and action plan, so that the partners, they know, okay, in 2 weeks, we have this deadline. In 2 weeks, we need to submit the need analysis at the institutional level. In 1 month, we need to prepare a budget draft, etc. So that also makes partners to be in constant communication with them, and then you know if you are delayed or not before the submission. I think that is very important. And as I mentioned before, also you will have this period of uncertainty between the application and implementation. So sometimes, like I think last year or 2 years ago, the executive agency announced that there will be a delay in the selection process. It took like 1 month longer. So if you receive that announcement, share it with your partner so that they are not worried that project was not selected or something like that. And as I mentioned, make sure that there is institutional support also in terms of resources, because at least you will need 10% of co-financing. So you need to discuss with authorities how this 10% could be obtained. Sometimes can be in terms of equipment, because if it's aligned to the strategy, and then they want to acquire or to improve their let's say their computer room. The university is already ready to buy some computers, some equipment, be part of your lab, and because it's part of the strategy and priority of institution, so you have these additional resources that you would not have if it's not part of the strategy. And in terms of financial risk, the change rates, what kind of can you open account in euros? This is something you need to think about, because it's better to keep, if you can, to have the money in euros, because that's the main currency for the project. In countries that this is not possible, that creates a risk. For example, in countries like Sri Lanka, they are obliged to change the money into local currency. So if you have in local currency, they have depreciation of 100% after the economic crisis in 2020. So what do you do in that case? So it's better maybe to take the money from that bank and put it in some deposit that you can keep the money in euros, or even take that money that came to university, change it in euros and keep it in a deposit box or something. This is risk that can impact very negatively a project, and need to think in advance to find for solutions. Remember that to be competitive, the project idea should fit with the institute, not only the institutional objectives, but you might have national objectives and priorities in the program. And now also you have 5 priorities that are given by the capacity building for higher education. So this should fit into one of the priorities, like for example, digital transformation and digital skills is one of the priorities. It's important that the strategy that you and the project idea that you develop also fits into the strategy of your partner, not only your institution, but also that of the partner. So if you have a project on international internationalization, look for partners that they have also that need. And part of their strategy is to develop internationalization of university. Don't look for partners that they have already very well established that strategy, because then the needs are different. Apart from the be supported by the authorities, also it's very important that you look what kind of projects were approved before. And then try to prepare or propose something that is new, not something that is repeated. And for example, we have some proposals like from Deusto on this tuning initiative that they do every year the same with different countries, but the idea is the same. So if some ideas are already developed in your country, in Kazakhstan, it's very possible that the commission, they will not fund that again. You need to look for something, even if you're a different institution. If that idea or project has been already funded in the country, I think it's would be very unlikely that will be funded twice in the same country. So look, that's also one of the advices is before submitting having the idea, well, you can have the idea, but verify. Look for previous calls for proposals, what kind of selected projects were for your country, and look if the idea that you had in mind has been already funded or not. Because if it has been funded, I think probably you should look for something else, or look it in a different way with different elements that can be considered innovative. Otherwise, it will be more difficult to be selected. Okay, so lot of concepts, a lot of ideas. Maybe you have some question now, or maybe some people would like to have.
If anyone has any question? Yeah, we do have one question, Carlos, so let me read it out for you. From Gisela Dormesh, or you can raise your hand and we can switch on your microphone.
Yes, okay, thank you. I don't know if I'm the first one. I heard you had two questions, so there's also a second person waiting. So if I may ask to thank you first of all for this very nice talk. It's very informative, and it just made my day, because I'm in the process of drafting a proposal, so it's really helpful. I have two questions that touched a bit of what you said before, and they're actually quite technical, and maybe you just by chance know the answer. We have now the layout that we have one university in one European country and a research institution in another country. And it appears that this research institution is not a higher education institution. Does this count or does it not count?
That does not count.
Okay, so this means that we would need another university to have three of them.
Yes, but what means is that you could have one university in that in the country of the research institute and the research institute as well. But if you have only the research institute, your project will be considered ineligible.
Okay, yeah, this was not so clear to me.
Yes, so if you have already contacts and agreement through the research institute to make it eligible, ask them to try to involve one partner from the same country, and then it would be okay.
Yeah, the other option would be to have even a university in a third different country in Europe. So that was the other idea. But since we know that budget is kind of tight, we didn't try to accumulate a lot of partners. Yeah. And the other question was very kind of, how to say, unusual question. I'm the project initiator, I'm a postdoc. So this means that by the time we might get the project, if it's successful, I would lose my postdoc job. Is it possible to fund one person within this project, like funding the co-PI or funding even the PI? Is that possible?
Yes, absolutely. Because what you describe, you have I will talk a bit later about the budget, but you have the money for staff costs. Is the university or the institution internally who decides how that money will be used. But you can have even, you have a condition for people that are not enrolled in the university. You can have contracts between university and individual people so that they can receive staff costs from university to perform particular tasks in the project. So yeah,
I agree that the position is a bit unusual, because usually people who initiate projects there, as you said, deans or rectors or professors. It's very unusual that the postdoc who initiates the project. But this was one point that I wanted to know if in theory it is possible to.
I think in theory is possible, because in the proposal also you in the electronic format. Now for example, when you apply, what they look is at the PIC number of your institution. So if it's validated, and then they have already all the information, and they have the main, the legal representative. You don't need to sign even anything now at the moment of presenting the proposal, because it's electronic. Only those projects that are selected, later they will need to sign documents, the grant agreement, but at the moment of the submission, you don't need to submit anything. So what you need to include in the application is a description of the key people that will be involved from each partner. So there you put your name and your experience, your publications, but then later is internal. So if you have a contract with your institution showing that you are working for them in different ways, you don't need to be full-time professor. You can be perfectly well coordinating the project.
This is good news. Good. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you. I don't see any other questions in the chat, and I don't see any other raised hands.
Okay. So then I will go to the 2 stages, and we will do a couple of exercises later on. So the first stage, when you start writing the project proposal, and that is my suggestion. You have the proposal, and in the proposal you have different sections that you need to fill. But for me, the most important, and before start writing the narrative, that it could be like a novel in a certain way, but is to develop, to have, the logical framework for me is the key to a project proposal. But this is part of the analytical phase. So there you need to identify the needs, define the needs, assess what is feasible within the project, what is the concept, what are the key stakeholders in the project, what are the problems and objectives you want to achieve. That is even before you start writing the whole context of the project. So even before transferring all this approach to the logical framework, the first step is to do a need analysis. So maybe a professor in agriculture has identified that because of climate change, or well, the so-called climate change, or for example, there is like a drought, and there is not enough water management system in the country. In general, not just like idea, or you need to develop kind of mitigation policies, and you see that there is some research or some activities that your department faculty is developing that could help to contribute to some need of the country, like for example here, water management system. And maybe you are in the water engineering faculty, you are the head of water engineering, and you are improving or working on some improvement of processes for irrigation or things like that. So once you identify existing situation in your context and real problems that your country and institution are facing, you start listing what kind of objectives are needed to solve this problem. Later, the amount of objectives, you can have many objectives, and sometimes we are over-ambitious in listing the objective, but you might need to reduce, because when you go to the budget, you know that you cannot cover all the objectives with a small budget that is given by the, well, or relatively small budget that is given by the European Commission or the executive agency. So you might need to reduce later on, but you start listing the objectives. And then you take the strategic decision, which you prioritize what objectives are most important. To start formulating the specific objectives, which are later correlated to the different work packages. And often the idea of a project comes from this realization of an opportunity. And this opportunity should be translated into the project objectives, the results, and the relevance. Then you start with a narrative. But usually it comes from something that is very clear to you, that there is a need. As I mentioned, some years ago, the need was to have experts in Bologna because there were no experts. Now many of the needs are related to digital processes, like e-libraries, or even within university, to the digital technologies, introduce e-learning, even digital governance to improve administrative processes, so the students can enroll even through online, or they have digital cards to access all services of universities. Then also in curriculum development, now we are in very fast changing times. So basically you need to update your curriculum every 1 to 3 years. Now, for example, recently everybody is talking about this ChatGPT and artificial intelligence. And now everybody wants to have courses that can cover this. A few years ago, it was about the blockchain and digital currency. So many universities now, you see that they offer masters for blockchain and things like that. So every time there is something new. Digital banking, digital currency. Now you see new masters that 5 years ago you didn't even hear about. And because there is some need. If, for example, there is now this pressure to move to digital currencies, at least in Europe, for example, and cashless society. So you need to adapt to all these processes, and in universities as well. So now in Europe, many of the infrastructure is digital. Even you have digital campuses and things like that that are developing very fast. Also, we talk about renewable energies. So many projects are about solar processes, having green universities, how you have a green university. So there is a whole systemic process that makes makes university to think about what kind of activities needs to be done, and this is top-down, bottom-up level. So it's not just to have a strategy, a white paper developed by institution. This needs to be done. How to improve how to contribute to the zero net carbon emissions, for example, by universities in Europe. I'm talking, but probably by extension that will arrive also sooner or later to Kazakhstan. No? Also, you are already that in Kazakhstan, they are supporting, the government is supporting more green initiatives, more, they are trying to not deviate completely, but at least to complement oil and gas industry with alternative energy resources, how universities are contributing to that. So there you might see an opportunity for a project, no? In terms of contributing to the net zero contribution of the country. For example, having greener universities, and for that maybe you might redesign the way that universities operate technically and strategically. So, for example, with administration, if you have everything digitalized, you don't need to print things. You don't need, normally when you go to an administration office or the university, you just see a lot of folders, everything is still in paper, no? So maybe they can digitalize all these processes and have everything in a system, internal system. So some of the projects that I've seen in Southeast Asia, for example, is about this, digital administration. So the project contributes to create like an internal management system, what we call information management system, where the administration can document all the information. So everything is a scan, PDF, and you can find it in internet. You don't need to have a whole collection of documents there, which, just printing and producing paper that also contributes to CO2 emissions in certain way, or the buildings themselves. So bringing solar panels, maximizing the timing. When you have light, you don't need electricity for light. So you also have like temporizers, no? When the lights are on, when the lights are off. So it's automatic, and some is aligned, for example, to the time light. So also in summer, you will have less light produced by university, in winter more because it's darker. So things like that. So make sure that indeed there is a need, and that also a need that contributes to the benefit of your country in these kinds of in this case, Kazakhstan, and then about the need share and discuss with different stakeholders, not within university, but also especially in strand 2 with local economic actors who can help, private industry. If we are talking about the strand 3, always with the Ministry of Education, which sometimes of challenging, and other ministries. So if the project is about agriculture or about energy, try to also get involved representatives of the Ministry of Agriculture, of the Ministry of Energy, for example. And then when we are working on the analytical phase, there are 3 main types of tools that we use. One is the stakeholder analysis to identify the group, people, and institutions which are likely to be affected by the project, identify the key problems and the concerns and opportunities they will face. So if we are talking about changes in the administrative system, you need to discuss with administration to find out if they will be supportive of your proposal or not. If you find they are going to resilient, and for example, very often, especially with curriculum development, is that, and that was main feature in Central Asian region, not only Kazakhstan. When at the beginning, like 10 years ago, we tried to implement Bologna, which is a student-oriented approach to education, we happened to see a lot of staff, academic staff, that they were very old, very used to the old Soviet system. how you do the changes if the professors are against you. So you would need or particular trainings or in a way that they don't interfere or involve younger teachers. So you need to make some important changes in university. But the case is that the old teachers, they are used to a certain system. You are not going to change them when they are 60 years old. What do you do to transfer or to integrate a student-centered approach to education to professors that they only know one way of teaching? So that was a real challenge. And many projects, I think they were not totally successful in achieving the results because of this, because they didn't do maybe a stakeholder analysis at the beginning. For example, in one project that I'm involved right now, there is a problem with technical capacity of certain partners. It's not that they don't want, it's that they are not capable of preparing a curriculum because they don't have necessary technical skills. This maybe should have been done before. Even they have trainings at technical skills, still after 2 years, they identify gaps. And if you don't have a comprehension of basic things, very basic technical things, I'm talking about engineering, then it will be difficult to teach a subject that you don't grasp the basics. So these are problems that might happen, and they can be identified from the beginning. So what helps us, this stakeholder analysis, is to identify who support your project, who can be a challenge or who can be an obstacle for your project. Also to identify then the key target groups, which can be also not only teachers or students, can be also administrative staff, or maybe also external actors. Try to see how they can be efficiently involved in the project, the representatives, and also identify what is the best form of involvement. So this is an example of a stakeholder matrix, for example. So you would list what are the key actors in your project. You would need to describe what are the stakes in the project. So this, you should not do it individually. You should do it with your working group. What do we need from them? What are their perceived attitudes and risks to the project? And what is the risk if they are not engaged in the project? And then from that, you would create like a stakeholder map. So depending on their attitudes to change, for example, the administration could be maybe that they have big power and influence, but they have a little interest in your project, so you just watch on them. So depending on the influence they have and the interest in the project, you would locate it in the stakeholder map, and this map will define the strategy that you need to deliver or to deploy during the application and after the application if the project was selected. And then after that, you also have this problem analysis. It's a tool to transfer the problem to objectives. And this also, the problem analysis is an important part of the stakeholder analysis, and there are two main tasks. You need to identify, you need to make an analysis of the identified problems faced by the stakeholder that will be involved in the project. And then you develop a problem tree that establishes the cause and effect. So for example, when we are formulating problems, we define the cause and effect relationships. And then in function of that, we develop a problem tree. So if we have a problem, like, for example, there is an unclear and inadequate legislation for social security. So the objective would be to improve or to create better law for social security and social justice. Of course, this is just like a generic example, because in capacity building, we can, the law that could be a problem is not up to us or up to institutions or individuals to solve. It's up to the parliament and to the legal bodies to change it. So this is just a generic example. But if, for example, the problem is that the higher education system does not provide professional profiles required by the labor market, so one of the objectives could be to contribute to the reform of higher education system in a way that the programs we have responds to the labor market. And many of the projects that have been selected or that have been running in Kazakhstan are involving representatives of the labor market and create courses that correspond to the market needs. At different levels. Or, for example, if the problem is that there is not a system of training in social work at higher education level, so the objective and the opportunity is to create a system of training in social work at higher education level. So to conduct an analysis of objectives, what we do is to develop objectives from the identified problems, identify the means to end relationships, and then to identify clusters of objectives that are helping us to define what is the project strategy. And this is when you have several projects, you need to prioritize. So one of the techniques is that you identify, let's say, 10 objectives. You say that 5 of them are top priority for my institution, my country. Maybe 3 are secondary objective and 2 are not important. The 2 you would reject, and the 3 that you selected as maybe potential objectives for your project, you would also say, this is top priority, these are not priority. Maybe from those 3, one you say, okay, I think this is important. And then you would include it in your 8 priorities, and then the others you will regard it. But then you have 6 priorities, and maybe you have budget only to fund 4 or to cover 4, you see, and then also you would prioritize what are the core priorities, and the other you would delete. And this is an example of problem tree. So what you see, the need or the problem, is that you have insufficient qualified personnel for modernization of private industry. And you see that the cause of having insufficient qualified personnel is that the national vocational education system is not adapted to the new economic conditions. And the causes of the national vocational education system is not adapted to the new economic conditions is that there is a weak directorate for vocational training, and that the training offered by ITCs doesn't correspond to the needs of the economy. ITCs like IT centers, for example. And why is that? Because there is a low and outdated technical standards of training, because there is an inappropriate training methodology applied in the centers. The budget for the centers is inadequate to implement and sustain appropriate training. Then the qualification of department personnel is inadequate for new tasks, and the national standards for vocational education training remain from the old system. So these are the problems. And now the first exercise is how to convert this problem into objectives. So here also that would link to the logical framework, as we will see later, in the sense that we need to identify what will be the main outcomes of the project based on a specific objective. So here I give you 5 specific objectives that are given by the specific causes. The outcomes should be related to the causes, which will give us what is the project purpose and what is the impact. So here we can have, I don't know how many participants you have available there now. I cannot see. I see
around
35.
32.
We have 2, so we have around 30. So maybe we can have 6 groups of 5.
Okay.
And then try to convert the problem tree into an objective tree. And remember, the objectives should be realistic in general, no? Specific and measurable. So realistic, that they can achieve within the time given by the project, like in the cases of strand 3. Specific, so that any progress towards the objective can't be attributed to the project and not to other cause, not maybe some initiative from the government. And measurable, that they are, you can know the cost that can be allocated to each objective, because in the logical framework, normally the specific, as I mentioned, specific objectives are linked to work packages. So you can calculate how much budget and how much will be the cost for each implementation of each work package. But right now, it's not difficult, I think. I would give like 20 minutes. Should try the exercise is to try to convert this problem tree into this objective tree. So we can have 6 groups of 5 and see what are the answers. Okay? So in the first group that I think I explained and it was okay. When you have this approach and this methodology, what you do is to identify what are the main problems and then to convert them into the objectives. So I was explaining like an example. If you have for example, a region that has like permanent drought or problems with water, maybe one of the reasons is because, and the core problem is that they have inefficient water management systems and irrigation system. So if that's the case, then what will be the main goal of the idea or the proposal? Should be the opposite. So if you have inefficient irrigation system, maybe the main goal is to have efficient irrigation systems. So in this case, for example, if you have irrigation systems, then the main impact, if you have an efficient irrigation system, impact is that you could mitigate, for example, the effects of warmer temperatures in the earth or in the soil. So in our example, if we have that the core problem is that the national vocational education system is not adapted to the new conditions, what would be then kind of main project goal? What would be? It's a question for the audience.
Anyone from the groups, can you share your discussions, what you've come up with?
I can, if nobody wants. So we understood that we should countermeasure all of these boxes. So when we sit at the core problem, the project should go into the direction of adaptation to new economic conditions. And then, of course, if we see the 2 causes, we need to identify a countermeasure to each of these causes, which then become the objectives. So the left objective on your chart would be to offer training, ITC training that is that corresponds more to the needs of economy instead of not corresponding. And regarding the direction or the directorate, if it is weak for whatever reason, we should strengthen this directorate to make it work better.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Yeah.
And some room participants were asking about the topic. If they need to choose a topic for the project or what?
No, so you identify here, for example, 2 of the outcomes that you convert them into objectives, but then what would be the sub-specific objectives? So if you have that one of the roots of the problems is the, for example, low or outdated technical standards of training, then what would be the objective?
So there was a problem tree, just to clarify for the participants, and your task was to convert it into objective tree.
Yes, exactly.
Mm-hmm. And for the problem tree, were they supposed to select the topic themselves or use the one that was indicated on your slide?
Because we don't have time, it was the one I indicated as an
Mhm.
example.
Okay.
If it's face-to-face, if I would do it face-to-face, then normally I could bring individual and then people can present. But because it's online, it's more efficient to have just one example, because if not, it would take longer. But it was with the example that I gave. So with the example that I gave is to come with a common solution.
Anyone else?
Now, then if you don't mind, then I think we can distribute to the groups breakout rooms again.
No, now we will not have time because we still need to go to the second exercise,
All
which
right.
take around half an hour. But basically, this is an example of what would be. So if we have that the problem is to have that we identify that there is an outdated technical standards of training. So the goal, the specific objective would be to update or to improve the technical standards. And if we know that the cause of one of the problems is that we have inappropriate training methodology in the centers, so what we should have as objective that then we will define our work packages is to create appropriate and modern training methodologies. That would be the objectives of the work package. So in many of the project proposals that are curriculum development, the problem they identified is one, they have lack of specialists, lack of experts in a particular area, that the programs in a study field is outdated, is not adequate to labor market needs. So what we create out of that, we have one of the work packages is the training, train the trainers, how to prepare better specialists for a particular study field. Another of the objectives then is to modernize, improve curriculum in a particular field. And that is one of your work packages. Then you have a methodology for curriculum development, etc. But it's all based on problems that we identify. And that's how we create it. This is the analytical part, even before writing the narrative. So if we know that we have one of the problems is that our lab equipment is outdated or is inadequate, what we try to do is to have improve, modernize lab premises and lab resources. So to bring equipment, etc. So here what we done is to convert the previous problems we identified into the objective trees, because this is going to help us later for the logical framework to define the project objectives and the specific objectives. And then, on function of that, you develop your logical framework. And as I mentioned, for me, also as evaluator, you know if a project is good or bad, just looking at the logical framework. Immediately, you know if project is good or bad. I added, everybody can have access to the last version of the logical framework. There are also some changes with previous versions, but you can see what is the template, and this one you need to attach to the application form. So the application form is a Word document, but the logical framework comes separate. You need to copy the logical framework and to integrate it into your application. And then your application has to be uploaded into the portal. That's how it works. If sometimes, I don't know, I don't think that's very common, but it might be that some of the proposals from last year or the last 2 years, they didn't include the logical framework. If you don't include the logical framework, you will not be selected, because they will not be able to assess properly one of the criteria, that is the design and implementation of the project. And if you don't get 50% of the points there, you will be rejected or you will fail. So it's very important to have the right format, the right version, and to integrate it into the logical framework. So as it comes, as an evaluator, that's the first thing I look. I look at the logical framework, and that already I know what is the project about, what they want to achieve, and then if there is a coherence between the different elements and components of the logical framework. I will explain a little bit about this. Also, think that the logical framework matrix, what you are going to receive or what you have available, is just the tool. Is the tool that you can develop. But this is based on an approach, what we call it a log frame approach. And the log frame approach is just the vision, how to perceive, how to plan, manage, and evaluate projects, using the tool to enhance the transparency and to improve this orientation of your project towards objectives. That's why first you do the objective analysis, the problem analysis, you convert it into the objective tree, and that is what you will transfer into the logical framework matrix. So as such, it's just like a management tool and an analytical tool to help managers and the coordinators to link all these elements that we were talking before, to link the main objective with the specific objectives, with the work packages, and with the activities that we need to develop. So it's a tool to help us think ahead, to think analytically what we want from our project. And this is one of the core tools that are used in project cycle management. So the approach is a way of thinking. The tool is the instrument that we use to transfer what we are thinking into concrete measures. Also, is a stakeholder presentational tool, what many coordinators do. When you are developing the concept node, you don't need to have a very elaborated concept node. If you have the logical framework, you don't need a concept node, because the concept node is already in your logical framework, most of it. At least you know what are the activities, what are the objectives, what are the indicators, what we want to achieve. What you don't know in a concept node, maybe, is the distribution of tasks between partners or responsibilities. But the core idea of the project is there. And when you want to invite partners, what they want to know, also to see if it's aligned to their interest and their strategy, is what we want to achieve. What is the concept? What is the goal of the project? That's the first thing. You cannot go to somebody, just join me to the project. It will not work out. So what the matrix, the Word document that you will have available, what helps you is to make visible this logical relationship between activities, outcomes, specific objectives, and objective. And then you can read it in two ways. You can read it vertically, top down, from seeing the connections between the overall goal to the activities, and to identify the causal relationships between them. And then you can also read it horizontally, where you can have to see if there is a logic between the goals, the indicators, the way we measure those indicators, and the assumptions and preconditions. Normally, you can do in different ways, but common technique is that first you write the goals, the main goal, then the specific goals, the outcomes, which are now called results, which are also translated into work packages and activities. And then you fill the assumptions and preconditions. Now it's called pre-requirements, but basically it's the same. And before, you have to identify the risk, the assumptions and risk in the previous program. Now is assumptions and preconditions, because already in one section of the proposal, you have a specific table that is for the risk, to identify risk. So you don't need to repeat that. But what is the assumptions and preconditions that we need to indicate there? So basically are the external factors that could affect the positive or negative implementation of our projects. Sometimes these preconditions and assumptions are external to our project control, but that's also a risk, no? But for example, if at overall level, typical conditions to be met is that maybe there is like economic stability in the country, or that there is that the project is aligned to the priority of the Ministry of Education or Ministry of Agriculture or particular ministry. So like your goal is at higher level, is a broad goal. The assumptions and preconditions are also at global or at broader level. Then when we talk about specific objectives, then there, yes, we go to a specific assumptions and preconditions that are internally and are easier to be under your control. But an assumption, for example, at a specific objective is that if we are talking about modernization of equipment, is that, for example, that we have the staff to maintain the equipment. We have the resources to maintain the equipment, and that's internal. You can control that in certain way. So assumptions at the specific level could be in terms of administration, could be in terms of this support from institutional authorities. At global level would be support from government authorities. Maybe at a specific level, the assumption and precondition is the support from institutional authorities. And then also some assumptions for achieving the goals at work package level. So for example, we were talking about the, for example, resilience from staff when making changes in curriculum. So here, one of the assumptions is that the staff will be supportive of the curriculum, will be motivation, adequate resources, etc. And then when you have the goals and the assumptions in the indicators, somebody changed my, yeah, this is the original template for this goal. Then you would go to the output. You would fill the column with the verifiable indicators. So there you should indicate or insert indicators that are verifiable, not indicators that you cannot have a track of them. So for example, if we are talking about global level, could be maybe statistics, macro indicators. Some projects, for example, are related to employability. So maybe what you want is an increase of employability among your students after the end of the project for particular field. Or if it's a structural project or a governance reform project, maybe some way of tracking. For example, in many universities, one of the key indicators, key performance indicators of that institution is the employability rate. And that also helps to the rankings and also for getting funds from governments. So for example, I cooperate in some projects with Glasgow Caledonian University in Scotland, and they have 93% rate of employability. So it means that the students get a job after finalizing their degrees in the next like 3 years. And that is really high level of success. And then that's a benchmarking, and they can compare with other universities. So for that, they need to have key partnerships with industry. Otherwise, it would not be possible. Or, for example, they have internships and they have work placements as part of the studies. That's also part of modernization of studies. That also many of the projects in Erasmus Plus are related to this, to employability, to work placement, and to facilitate internships. So here you need to define clearly indicators. So like could be percentages, could be quantitative. For example, I would not include here many qualitative indicators because they are very difficult to be demonstrated. Many times you can see, one of the key indicators is bigger impact of the project and how you assess the bigger impact. That is more difficult than to assess how many students graduated or how many students increased from one year to another. How many teachers participated in the project, rather that the goal is increase of awareness. For example, these are vague concepts that are very, very, very difficult to assess. No, so the more tangible and the more verifiable the indicators you include there, I think the better will be assessed and appreciated by the evaluators. Then if we go to the means of verification, this is a very common mistake by many proposals, is that they misunderstand the means of verification with the verifiable indicators. So in the means of verification, you would still see especially the qualitative indicators. The means of verificator is nothing more than how you are going to report on those indicators or where you can get the sources of those indicators. So sometimes can be in national statistics, can be official documentation, reports from the government, if we talk at global level. If we talk at institutional level, can be institutional records, institutional reports, could be project documentation. For example, if we talk about like graduates, how you prove could be list of participants. When we are talking about means of verification, how you saw those results. So you have some transcript of records, or you have some administrative records that you can prove that the increase, for example, from year to year in number of graduates in a specific study. Or if, for example, in the activities, you have the website and you have dissemination events, conference. So the means of verification would be the web statistics, tracking data that are available, could be, as I said, list of participants, number of conference proceedings produced with invoices, inventory. When we talk about equipment, all that is means of verification. Means of verification is not to know that how many computers you have. That is the indicator. But the means of verification is how you prove that these indicators are obtained. And very often they misunderstand that in project proposals. And this is the last thing that you would add. Also, one, if I can continue sharing my screen. Can I?
Leslie, can you stop sharing your screen so that Carlos shares the screen?
Okay, so I can continue. Yes. So here, the only thing is that when we talk to activities in the proposal, normally, here you don't include the verifiable indicators. What you include is the inputs. And when we talk about inputs, we talk about, for example, the resources that are needed. You can mention there, for example, the cost for each work package or for each activity. So you would say, for example, in equipment, the input is 10 computers, 1 lab, etc. You also can include in terms of resources, so how much is how many euros are from the co-finance, how many euros are from funded in staff costs, in mobilities or in travel costs, in equipment subcontracted. So you would specify these are the inputs, these are the funds available for the project, how many people involved, for example, in terms of management days, administrative days, teacher days, how many mobilities maybe flows from Europe to Central Asia, or to Kazakhstan, from Kazakhstan to Europe. So you can be descriptive. The most descriptive, the better. But there you would include the inputs in the last version. So you don't need to include there the indicators. Indicators in activities at activities level is substituted by the inputs. And so the next exercise, based on the table that they showed before, is that I give you the goal objective of one selected project. And I give you also the specific objectives of a selected project. And in function of the goal, general objective, and the specific objective, what I would like you to do is to try to develop the rest of the logical framework to see if it's possible. This would take around 30 minutes, more or less. What we can do also, if we run a bit of time, is that to give to each group like one of the boxes. So, or one of the columns. So one group works on the indicator column, one work on the activity column or on the activity session. Another group works on the assumptions, for example, assumptions at general objective and assumptions for the specific objectives. I think that could help a bit. Or if we have 6 groups, for example, we can, one group can try to find out the indicators at global broad level. Another group, the indicators for the specific objectives. Another group, the assumptions for the general objective. Another group, the assumption for the specific objectives. Another group, the means of documentation for the general objective. And another group, the means of documentation for the specific objectives. Then we have 6 groups.
So for this exercise, the participants need to use the logical framework Word document that we've shared earlier, right?
Yes.
And the general topic is development of modular program of cybersecurity. So we need to come up with all those fields completed for this exact topic, right?
Yes.
Okay, so Nazirke, how will we assign participants to breakout rooms?
Just a minute. Currently, we have only 17 participants who can join the activity. So
Okay.
shall we have them as 6 breakout rooms or less than that?
No,
Maybe
then
less.
we can have four groups. One group will work on the indicators and the means of documentation, and the second group on the assumptions and preconditions at global level. The third group, so the first group will work on the indicators and the means of documentation. And the second group on the assumptions and preconditions for the general objective. The third group would define indicators and the means of documentation for the specific objectives. And the fourth group, it would identify the assumptions and preconditions for the specific objectives. Is everybody back then?
Yes.
So maybe we could start with a group from developing the assumptions and prerequisites. What you identify as main assumptions for the main goal, and what is the assumption for the specific goal. Maybe you can go back to the screen with the exercise. I think it's the slide 51. If you go to 51, Sanjay.
Nazirke, can you please share the presentation and go to the slide 51? Meanwhile, we can ask someone from the second group to present, right? On the assumptions and prerequisites. Yes.
Yes, exactly.
So any volunteers from the second group?
So what would be your main assumptions and prerequisites to make your project achieve these goals? Or for the project to achieve these goals that they stated in the proposal? What kind of ideas you had? Did you come with some idea? So normally also in terms of a structure, if you write 5 specific objectives, what I would expect is to see at least 5 assumptions. So for every objective, an assumption. Now, in the general objective, normally is 1 or 2 maximum. And sometimes you have like 2 or 3 indicators. So if you have 2 or 3 indicators in the main global assumption, I would expect 2 or 3 main assumptions. And also it's good practice that you use bullet points. So if the specific objectives are 5, you could put 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then in each column for the specific objective, you could put also 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 in terms of indicators, in terms of means of verification, and also in terms of assumptions, because sometimes it's very confusing. You put a number of objectives and then there's no correlation between, maybe in the cell is there, but for the evaluator, it has more effort to see what is the assumption that corresponds with the first objective, or what is the indicator that corresponds with the first objective. So if there is an order with bullet points, it helps. I think the evaluators appreciate that, because then it's more visible what is the interconnection between all the different elements. So come on, tell me some of the assumptions that you identified for this project proposal.
Can we say about technology and infrastructure?
Yeah, probably at global level, that could be one of the assumptions, that there is yeah, that there is IT infrastructure for specialists in cybersecurity to be able to operate. What other assumptions and prerequisites you think would be necessary for your project at global level? Remember that the global impact, the broad goal, also is linked to like national priorities and to national objectives. So maybe here also one of the assumptions and prerequisites is that the project supports or reinforces or strengthens kind of national strategic policies for cybersecurity. That could be one of the generic assumptions. And also there at global level, because you see the objectives is also not only within universities, maybe that it could be assumption that the cybersecurity is like a increasing top policy priority for the government, or that there is an increased interest by society, civil society, to have the minimum cybersecurity skills. That could be a generic assumption.
And I'll give samples for specific objectives, schedule and methodology. Am I right? No.
In terms
Can
of
we say about, yes, for specific objectives, methodology and schedule?
Of cybersecurity?
Yes, of the project maybe, cybersecurity. Methodology.
But I think you should reformulate that. When you talk about assumptions and prerequisites, you talk about factors that can help to reach the objectives in your project. So if you talk about methodology, I'm not sure exactly what you mean by that, but one of the assumptions maybe is that the right methodologies are in place, or but methodology in terms of training, methodology in terms of what do you understand by methodology?
Methodology of development of the, for example, program. Here I read about development of modular program, 3 or 4 of courses, 3 ECTS credits. In developing programs like this, maybe we can say about methodology, about schedule.
Yes, I know, I understand what you mean. But I would not include that as a precondition or as an assumption, because that might the objective itself is to have the improved methodology, but that means that if you put as a precondition, I think it contradicts the objective, because the objective is trying to solve a problem. So the precondition should be to kind of external factors. Don't confuse the assumption with the objective. The objective is to have the right methodology for cybersecurity. Maybe the problem is that there was outdated or poor methodologies developed. The assumption is some factor that will help you to achieve the objective of having the right methodology. So the assumption and prerequisite is maybe that you have the support from academic or from the IT department to produce the right methodology, or you have the support from the authorities, support from the academic affairs to develop the right methodology for cybersecurity. That could be the assumption.
So simply put, these are external or out of our control conditions that can positively or negatively affect the implementation of the project.
Yes.
Let's say we assume purchasing some equipment from Russia. This is the objective, and then my assumption or prerequisite would be the openness of the borders with Russia, or for instance, if there is a sanction for Russia, we cannot purchase this equipment, and this will be one of my assumptions.
Exactly.
Okay.
So your assumption is that there is a supply or that you can buy equipment from Russia without any problem. That's your assumption.
Okay. Understood. Okay.
Yeah, so for example, for every specific objective, you have an assumption. And before, in the last proposals, for example, in terms of successful project implementation, one of the common assumptions is that the COVID impact is mitigated, or that there will be COVID measures would not affect the implementation of the project. That would be the assumption.
I think we have a question from Adeda.
Yeah.
Sorry, actually, we were preparing for the indicators, but for example, assumption for the first purpose would be the restrictions from the government, for example, to implement new educational programs, maybe. Could this be an assumption? I don't know. Maybe the ministry will not support this.
But you have to put it in positive. So the assumption is
Oh.
that the ministry will support or will approve the new courses.
Mhm. So it should be positive and negative, or
No, positive or negative is the impact. But the
Mm.
assumption should be positive.
oh, sorry. Mhm.
The negative is the risk.
Oh,
But the
okay.
assumption is that there is a stability in the economic stability, that there is support, that there is the right people, their motivation is always positive. The risk is what is negative. The risk is the lack of support, the lack of equipment, the lack of necessary stuff, etc.
Now I see it. Thank you very much.
Excuse me, but do we have a box for risk also?
As I mentioned before, it could be included here, but now the box for risk is in the application. So you have one section in the application form that is risk, and there you have to number the risk 1 to 10, the link to workwear package, and also to include the contingency measure. So you identify the risk. What will you do to reduce that risk?
Okay.
Yeah, but it's in the application form, but it's in a separate section.
Any other questions, comments?
Somehow I think that we all kind of understand the coherence of these factors. It seems to me that since we all are probably from different fields of science, we indeed have a problem with the terminology, because we are not very used to call things prerequisites or a methodology or this or that. So I think it's not a question of not understanding what this proposal should contain. It is rather a problem of naming things with a particular terminology.
Yes, these are terminology that are mainly given by the European Commission and executive agencies, so we just follow, no? But also one of the complexity of these projects is that they like to change terms, and that's confusing for people. Like, for example, outcomes. Before, you have outcomes and outputs. Outcome is intangible result, outputs are tangible results. Now you don't have outcomes and you don't have outputs. Now you just have results. In other projects, other programs of Erasmus+, you don't have results, you have intellectual outputs. So in one place is outcome, in another is output, another intellectual output, now is results. They only want results. Result 1, result 2, result 3. So if they change constantly, people also get confused, even if it means exactly the same thing.
I think this is just us who is a bit slow in this exercise, because we have to get to know this terminology. So for me, I'm a geologist. I usually don't talk with this kind of words.
Exactly, and also the logical framework is like a management tool, but is mainly used. This is not used by corporations or private companies, but this is mainly used by international organizations, EuropeAid, all the cooperation agencies. They tend to use this, but not universities, not companies. You have also other tools. The stakeholder analysis, yes, that's very much used in different sectors. But this logical framework is mainly for intervention activities. It has the intervention logic. Like also now, for example, it's very common, humanitarian organizations. You have either this or you have what we call theory of change approach. So it's a different methodology, but this is mainly used by international organizations. Yeah.
Then indeed, this may be a good idea to involve people from project management or international departments who can speak this language to us.
Yeah, I think it's important to have somebody with management skills in the preparation of the proposal, because it's all about planning. And if you are a manager, planning is the main function, is the first priority. and then influencing and controlling. But yeah, I think part of the project proposal preparation is purely management. So for the academics, sometimes this is difficult because I know many academics, professors, but they are terrible managers. So it would be very easy that they send the proposal later, and because it's not like an open call. I don't know if you want to go to some of the indicators, but basically, yeah, I think if you are talking about development of modular program on cybersecurity, so one of the indicators, for example, could be the number of teachers retrained or the number of students registered. If we are talking about modernization of cybersecurity classrooms, so one of the indicators, for example, could be about the not inventory, but yeah, in certain way, inventory of the premises, the installation of X number of equipment, everything related to the equipment provided in those classrooms. If we talk about micro-credentials and lifelong learning, it would be the same: how many participants, how many certificates. Also, as priority in the proposals is about gender balance. So it's also good to even specify how many male and females are benefiting from the proposal in terms of indicators. So in some proposals, you will see that the objective is 50% of female participants in a specific program. Because that is also aligned with the priorities of the European Commission, which is called also cross-cutting indicators, cross-cutting. Then in terms of formative workshops, could be yeah, number of workshops. If you mentioned their visibility of the project, then it would be, for example, how many visitors in the website, how many newsletters, how many videos produced, or promotional video campaigns, things like that. And then if we are talking about successful project implementation, it could be everything related to performance indicators. It could be like results from feedback, motivation percentage, satisfaction with the project. Those are all indicators that can help describe what are the key results of your project. I had up to 80 slides, but I think we can finish now. So I will not go into the rest of the presentation, but I could stay here maybe two hours more. So I don't think I want to take more of your time. We are already 3 hours, I think, but as I mentioned from the beginning, for me, also, when you try to invite other partners, if you have the logical framework in place, I think you will advance much more. And also, it will help you with the narrative of the proposal. When you have this in your hand and is coherent, is of good quality, and there is a logical sequence logical connection between all the elements, then when you are writing the project proposal, it goes much smoother. Because also you use that like a blueprint for the rest. So if you know the indicators when you are making the description of work packages, so they need to be related, the different parts of the proposal. Or in the narrative, when you are talking about the need analysis of the project. So there needs to be a relationship between them and the logical framework. That also one of the typical weaknesses and flaws in many projects is that maybe the logical framework is good, but then it's incoherent with the different sections. Maybe in the logical framework, you talk about 4 courses, and in one section appears 3 courses, and in another, in the impact, appear 2 courses. So the numbers doesn't correspond. So when you are checking the different sections. Oh, but you mentioned here 300 people, and here is only 200, and in the other section is 100. That will reduce points in the evaluation and in the quality of design. So it's very important that you put everything here, and then you follow what is in the logical framework, and you reflect it in the different sections.
Thank you very much, Carlos. We don't want to take more of your time. And these 3 hours have been really useful and valuable, full of theoretical and practical information. And those practical exercises help me personally to look at the project proposal from the perspective of the evaluation committee. So you explained us what to focus on. So these were very helpful. And I want to remind to the participants that the Carlos presentation, actual presentation, includes 81 slides. So we will upload this into the Google Drive so that you have an access to that. You can look at the entire presentation, and we will upload the recording of the session on our YouTube channel as well. So Carlos, thank you very much. I cannot give you my thanks enough, and there were lots of words of gratitude in the chat already. So thank you very much for the presentation, for your time, for you to putting together this presentation just for us. So we appreciate your efforts and your time. Thank you very much. And thank you, all of you who stayed till the end, the strongest participants. So we appreciate your time as well. So stay in touch. I think Nazirke sent links to our social media channels. Please follow our channels to stay tuned on. And let us know if you have any questions and comments. I think Carlos has equipped you with all the with all detailed information with regards to the project proposal. But still, we will repeat these sessions offline, starting from the fall, closer to the opening of the old calls. So I think I'll see you personally in person soon in the fall. So thank you very much. Carlos, any final words from you?
No, just if you later decide to prepare the proposal, yeah, if you need some further clarification or some tip or something, just contact me. Laura has my email, so the next call will be in February 2024 probably. I think the announcement will be around October, November. So you can already prepare project idea, and by the time that the call is open, already have the basis to prepare a competitive proposal. Yeah.
So until fall, what universities can do at this point is to think over an idea, a project idea, right? And the logical framework of the project proposal.
And to discuss internally.
Yes, internally, and consortium, maybe if they already have partners.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you. Stay healthy, dear participants. We are now finishing our session. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you.
And bye-bye.
Very much.
Bye.
Goodbye. Thank you.
Ciao.
Everyone.
Thank you.
Goodbye.
Goodbye.
Ciao.